Well, hello. Welcome back to Lesson the Amateur Theologian. So, I actually got this conversation about the 144,000. And so I actually want to see what is said about the 144,000. Jehovah Witnesses are always claiming, hey, they're the only ones who can be it. And they were true Jehovah Witnesses and stuff. Well, what does the Bible actually say about the 144,000? And so that's what we're going to explore today. So let's take a look here. Now, first things first, let's get the handy dandy Bible open. Lots of notes, lots of notes. But the 144,000 actually comes from Revelations 14. Let me use a cleaner version here. Brenton, Darby. Um, there we go. ESV should work. Um, Says, then I looked and behold on Mount Zion there stood the Lamb, Jesus that is, with him 144,000 had his name who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. So number one, they're going to have Jesus and the Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like a roar of many waters, saying, loud thunder, the voice I have heard, the sound. Start over. Heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on some harps. And they were singing a new song for this before the throne and before the four living creatures and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000. So there's going to be a new song here that the 144,000 will have. Um, I don't I don't know. I don't understand what this is going for, but apparently they're going to be able to sing a song that most of us won't. Nod and smile. Nod and smile. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But then moving on here, it says, it is these who not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. Whoa. These guys are virgins. How many of your Jehovah Witness people who claim to be part of the 144,000 are actually virgins? And given the fact that they have not defiled themselves with women, I would put the case forward that these were men, especially because it traditionally it was considered men. You know, men would defile themselves with women. And since we're talking to a believing class here, where it's already been established women with women is not the way of God, that's in Romans 1:22 to Romans chapter 1 verses 22 to the end, basically establishes a lot of stuff, including anti-lesbianic. But basically, it's saying, okay, these are going to be 144,000 virgins. Most of the people I've heard of, at least, that claim, even, oh gosh, what's his name? C.T. Russell. Even C.T. Russell had wives. So he's not one of the 144,000. So these have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for the Lamb, for God and the Lamb. So they're first fruits. Now that is going to come in handy in a moment. Um, in their mouth was found no lie was found, and they are blameless. So they have to be speaking the truth, which means they can't preach false gospels or anything, and they have to be blameless, meaning they walk perfectly before God. Interesting, huh? And then from here, it basically goes on, and the 144,000 aren't necessarily mentioned. So let's go over our list once again. They have the Father's name written on their heads. They can sing a song that no man could. Now here comes the earthly qualifications that are good to note. 14:4, they have not defiled themselves with women. They're basically virgins. They followed the Lamb no matter what. Okay, follow the Lamb no, wherever he goes. It's what it says here. In others, it says that they follow the Lamb. Let me go over to King James here. Um, it said they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So I would make a case that they didn't fear for their lives, but hey, it's just a quick case. My thoughts on that. The one I'd like to focus on here, though, in a little more depth, is it says they are the first fruits. And this is interesting because aparche aparche is the word for first fruits here. And just to show you here, I know it's jumping around a little bit. Um, oh, dang nabbit, it jumped. So let's get back to Revelations 14:4. Says they are the first fruits. And so let's go. They are the first fruits. Aparche. So let's look at the references here. Reference 1. Romans 8. Not only they but themselves are they which are the first fruits of the Spirit. In context, he's talking to the church as they're being persecuted and calling the early church the first fruits of the Spirit. Likewise, Epaphras is first fruits of Achaia. That's not going to help us much to understand, but basically those are the first fruits there. First fruits of them who slept. So in context, we have a hope in Christ, and now Christ, risen from the dead, and become the first fruits of them who slept. So if you want to make that claim that Christ is a dying and rising example of what's to come, yeah, okay. From that verse alone, you could possibly make a case. But this is saying of those who would excuse me, those who would die and rise. You can basically say, hey, Christ is first. Then come the first fruits. Then come the rest. Which is basically what it says here. Every man in his own order. First Christ, the first fruits. Afterwards, they that are Christ in the coming. Which, oh look, that's the next reference. I beseech you, brothers, first fruits of Achaia. That's not going to help us because it's talking about a specific person. But then James says, of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creature. So James is talking to the early church, and he's saying that they should be a first fruits, the first harvest of, well, God's creation. So here's another plausible scripture that would lead me to believe that it was the early church indeed. But then, of course, we come back to Revelations and so that word for first fruit, as you can see in context, it refers more so to the church, except when someone specific is mentioned, in which case that first fruit is the first people they witness to, the first ones to come to Christ, more or less to show fruit of the Spirit out of their ministries. So I would pose to you, this 144,000 that the Jehovah Witness claim, oh, it's just us, they're going to be the ones with the heavenly hope. Okay, if you want to make that claim, back it up with scripture. But I think I've demonstrated here that 144,000 are going to be virgins from the early church. Virgins from the early church. I would say it's well within context of the scriptures. But comment below, keep it civil as always. I'd love to hear from you. The thing about Jehovah Witness, and this is my experience, is that they shut down as soon as you can show them otherwise. And so I certainly do welcome a Jehovah Witness to come forth and show me within Scripture, where do you see this? Where do you see this? But first, I do want to ask you one thing. Do you believe that Scripture is theopneustos, God-breathed, and profitable for doctrine? Additionally, I want to ask you, do you believe that Scripture is inerrant? Because if Scripture is not inerrant, then, well, let's just face it. If Scripture is not inerrant, then you can take any Scripture you want and make anything. Where it says, hey, in the Old Testament, hey, slay the Canaanites. Well, I could start labeling people as modern Canaanites and killing them. But that would be taking something out of context and doing with it something that you're not supposed to. But then again, though, if Scripture is inerrant and if Scripture is consistent, then there's a reason that it's a progressive revelation, starting at Genesis, ending at Revelations, the progressive revelation of the path of God. And that's what I believe. Less than amateur theologian saying thanks for watching. Um, Keep pursuing God, and if you do decide to comment below, hey, keep it civil, guys. Thanks.